Good afternoon, mortgage coaches. Thanks for joining us for another Mortgage Coach training session. For today's course, we're going to be discussing the cost of waiting strategy. I'm going to kind of wait for a few more people to trickle in before we start getting into content, but want to give you a little bit of an overview first and some reminders real quick. Just so you know, in our GoToMeeting panel, if you open that up, there is actually a questions area in there. So if you do want to ask questions or you need me to stop and repeat something, maybe I'm going a little too quick, just let me know in the questions area. I'll be watching that on my second screen. So as questions come in, I'll try and address them to the best of my ability. But beyond that, I do also want to let you know that this call will be recorded. I'll go ahead and put it up on our YouTube channel after we're done with today's session. But you'll also get an email from our GoToWebinar platform that will have a link to view the recorded session. So keep that in mind. If you fall a little bit behind during this call, or if you're not able to follow along, you got to take a call or something, you got to put out a fire. Totally understand. It happens to me too. This will be available for you in our YouTube channel. And again, if you need to get to our YouTube channel, it's just youtube.com/mortgage coach. That'll take you right to the channel. Now, you can also get there from our website if you'd like. Down at the very bottom of any page on our website, you're going to see that we have our social icons down here. So if you click on YouTube, that would take you directly to our channel where you can run searches for any of our public events that are in there. Now, one of the reasons I'm starting on the website here is I do want to show you a couple of sample cost of waiting analyses. Now, if you have gone through our support center, if you've been a member for a little while, you've seen several different iterations of what a cost of waiting presentation can look like. And I'm going to show you where you can find those. So if you hover over Connect and then choose Total Cost Analysis, this is going to bring you to a screen that will allow you to see some examples. So if you're brand new to our software, you haven't prepared a whole lot of these yet, you really kind of want to get an idea for how other originators are using this for their work, just click on this button here. That's going to take you over to our example page. And you can see each photo actually represents a single presentation. And we tell you what the strategy is. So for instance, this is a pre-qual for purchase power, rent versus own, refinance scenarios. And you'll see that there's a few in here called cost of waiting. So let's check those out. All right, so there's one from Tim Lamb. That's a good cost of waiting presentation. There's a couple more in here. Let's see. There we go. That's the final one from Brad Loudon. Both those are really solid examples of cost of waiting presentations, but they're a little different. Now, if you've gone through our help menus before and checked these out, you'll notice that in our cost of waiting help, we show you a way to show 4 different products against each other. And we basically give you kind of like the overkill version and show you how to take items away that you don't want to see. So in our standard cost of waiting, we'll show what it looks like to buy right now. And then we'll show what would it look like if the borrower waited for a drop. And then we'll show what would happen if they waited, and in the time they waited, not only did the price not drop, but the rates went up. And then the final would be a worst case scenario where they waited too long, both rates and price went up. Now, that works great when you see a market where you're actually still seeing some bidding, or you're still seeing a little bit more of buyer power versus seller power. But right now, there's so little inventory that it's really more on the seller's side right now. So we won't have a whole lot of borrowers saying, you know what, I'm going to wait and see if he drops the price. That's just not happening all that much right now. So in today's market, I would alter this a little bit so that instead of showing a potential for price drop, you're going to show them what it would look like to buy right now. You'll show them what would happen if there was a 1/4 point rate increase. You show them what happened if there was, say, a 25 grand price increase, and then show them what happens if both occur. So it's a little bit different strategy that we're going to be showing you today. And let's take a look at what that looks like. So let me just kind of bring up an empty window here. And I'm going to bring my mobile device in here. Now, the reason I'm starting on mobile here is I want you to see what it looks like when your borrower actually clicks on one of your links. Now, part of what you're learning today is I'm going to teach you how to actually create this presentation, but I do want to show you the overall view of how you could present this as well. So the borrower immediately, when they click on your link, they're going to get your disclosure just like they normally would. And they have to hit I understand. Now, if there is a video message on this, it'll show them this video trigger. They can choose to watch the video, or they can cancel out and just proceed through the proposal. Now, for today, I'm just going to cancel out. You aren't going to be able to hear my video anyway, so I will just go ahead and cancel that. And you can see in this case, we're showing just like a total cost analysis, we have a summary section, but check this out. We've got net monthly payments, rent versus principal paid, rent versus interest paid. Hopefully some of you longtime users are noticing this is actually a rent versus own presentation. So kind of critical here. You can build your cost of waiting presentation either as a total cost analysis or a rent versus own. It just kind of depends on what the story is that you're trying to tell. Now, for today's presentation, I'm going to show you how to do a rent versus own. But at the very end, I'm going to show you how, without doing any more work, you can also generate a TCA off that same proposal. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Now, just like any other proposal, you've got your branding here on the left side, and then you've got 4 areas that the borrower can dive into. And when we go into the summary section, much like the TCA, is going to show some different options against each other. And you can see in this case, because it's a rent versus own, I'm showing rent and I'm comparing it against those options that I talked about. Buying right now, what happens if the rate increased? What happens if the price increased? What happens if both increase? And we can really see what's happening here in the numbers. You can see 4.25 is our rate here on the buy now, and we're looking at 4.5 for the rate increase. On the price increase, we didn't increase the rate. On the worst case, we did both. So those are the kind of elements that I want to point out to you here, but I am going to show you how to input these specifically. Now, one thing to keep in mind on the rent versus own. Rent versus own shows 2 different types of payments on it. Now, you'll notice that there is a total payment right here. So there's my total rent payment, $1,650. Here's my total PITI payment for buying now. Now notice that there's columns beneath these showing things like tax benefit and principal paid. We're looking at these as benefits, not costs. So when we're looking at this net monthly payment, this line item going all the way across, this is comparing not the PITI payments, this is comparing the net cost of each loan. So when we look at rent, the cost is $1,650 a month. There's no way you're getting around it. You're putting that in somebody else's pocket. So as you're telling the story, obviously that's going to be one of your get off the fence points, right? But then when we talk about, okay, fine, borrower understands, rent's not going to be the best case. So yeah, we're thinking about buying. We're just not sure when to do it, right? And I can tell you, having recently bought a home, I was in that exact same situation where, okay, we got enough money for the down payment, but I'm not quite comfortable yet. I know I can make this payment work, but it's just not the right time for me. And, I watch Rate Watch. I watch the mortgage-backed security market. I know exactly what's going on at any given time. And for me to have some hesitation on that, it really tells a lot about the borrower mentality. So this is what you're trying to attack, regardless of whether that borrower has a ton of information about what's going on in the market or has zero information. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So we want to be able to show them what could potentially happen that could derail this plan for home ownership. So we want to get that out in front of them. Make a decision now so that these potential options don't happen. Now, on the net monthly payment, we're taking that PITI payment, we're subtracting out the tax benefit, we're subtracting out the principal paid, and then we arrive at a net monthly payment, a net cost of doing this buy now option of about $1,000 a month versus the rent that they're throwing away at $1,650. And as we continue forward, you can see they're all relatively the same here. It goes up a little bit when we look at our price increase and then our worst case. But check out the PITI payments. They're going up pretty significantly here. We get to almost a $125 jump here, about $150 jump here. Now we look at our bottom line here, net monthly savings. When we look at the real costs of each one of these potential options, you're going to save money no matter what on any of these purchase options. But the question is, once we've overcome the objection of you need to purchase a home, it's why is it important to purchase it right now? That's where we really get into these projections going forward. Now at the very bottom of the mobile app, you'll notice that we can dive into the payment breakdowns. We can dive into the closing costs. So you can see payment breakdown. It just takes the PITI, breaks it apart so they can actually see what these are made of. We can go into the closing costs and it'll show kind of the ballpark totals here. And then if you have chosen to itemize, you'll see there's actually a fee detail icon down at the bottom. And if you click on fee detail, it'll actually bring up the itemization that you used inside Mortgage Coach. Now, finally, we have a reinvestment grid. Reinvestment really doesn't come into play too much on a cost of waiting strategy, but it's still got some very useful information in it. Things like where's the MI cutoff? This is the only place where MI cutoff is really shown is inside the reinvestment grid. So that can be part of your conversation as well. Now, when we take a look at this, when the rates increase, it actually increases where their MI cutoff is. So not only are they getting a higher rate that's incurring a higher payment, but they've got 2 extra months of mortgage insurance that they're going to have to pay as a result of that because they're not paying down the balance quite as fast. And we see that as we go forward here, when we get that rate increase on the final column, we're seeing the same thing on that MI. So it's going to cost them 2 more months of MI. Now, when we scroll down here, we get to a lot more detailed functionality for the reinvestments. If you're not structuring a reinvestment strategy for this, which on a cost of waiting you probably wouldn't, don't worry about that. You're really just looking at the top section here. And if you're trying to drive your borrower's attention to different elements as you're walking them through the presentation, I would stay pretty cursory when you get to the reinvestment grid. Just kind of keep it at the top level, maybe point out the MI cutoffs, point out what the PITI payments look like. This is also where you can see if you've got combo liens on here, you can actually see both liens next to each other. So pretty cool little grid for getting a good summary out of it. Now, when we go back, we get to net monthly payments. Now, remember I told you net monthly payments, we're really looking at just the costs over time, right? Or the cost for the monthly payment. Now, when we look at this one, this already has the tax benefit and the principal paid subtracted out. If we were to tap on more info, this will actually just give us the numbers behind there. Now, when we get to the rent versus principal paid, and again, you can choose alternative metrics. You don't have to choose the ones I use, but rent versus principal paid, how much money are you going to throw away at rent over the next 5 years? Well, you're going to throw away $105,000. In that same time period, making roughly the same out-of-pocket expense, you're going to actually be accruing equity with the amount of principal you're paying. So do you want to throw away $105,000, or do you want to retain $21,000 in equity so you can grow your net worth over time? Pretty simple discussion at that point. But then you can also dive into the more info sections and check those out. This is going to show just the breakdown at the 60-month period of time, what the net costs are for each one of the options. This is a real good telling point here. Net cost of renting, $105,000. Net cost of buying, $60,000. Pretty easy sell on that one. And you can see real estate value as a renter, you have no value. As a homeowner, you've got a real estate value. So you're starting to accrue some equity. And then we can see where our loan balances are here. Obviously, as a renter, you don't owe any money, but you are still making a payment that's going into somebody else's pocket. And then as a renter, no equity at all, but you do have equity in any of these home ownership options. Now, finally, we get to the long-term area. Now, the long-term, I've got it earmarked as rent versus interest because these are both costs. So when we're looking at, you're going to throw away $368,000 in rent over a 15-year period of time. It's going to cost you $144,000 in interest if you were to buy. Which one is the bigger cost for you? So it's another one where it's kind of a no-brainer that renting is not going to be the right option. But now we get into the story of how much more will it cost you to wait. So when we're looking at this, rent, yeah, it's going to cost you money. Buying, it's going to save you money. You're going to only spend $143. But if you wait for a quarter point increase, you're going to spend $152 in interest over that same amount of time. You wait for a price increase. Now you're spending $157. You get a worst case, you're spending $167 over that same 15-year period of time. Now, again, the more info section will drill down on the numbers for you so you can actually see what the totals are at the 15-year point. Now, let's look at how to create this bad boy. So let me get this off the screen here. And I am going to go ahead and open up my Mortgage Coach for you. And give me just a second here. There we go. All right, so when you want to create one of these presentations, what you want to do is you want to hit New Client. Now, anytime you want a borrower-facing presentation, whether this is going to be a total cost analysis, a rent versus own presentation, or even a seller buy-down flyer that doesn't have any co-branding on it, so it's just you initiating the seller buy-down flyer, all three of those can be done by generating New Client. When you want co-branding, you can do a new partner. Now, the two potential presentations in there are the open house presentation and the co-branded seller buy down presentation. It's exactly the same seller buy down as in the new client. The difference is it's just got your realtor's information on it too. Now, we're going to stay away from partner section today because we are going to be specific to a borrower. So I clicked new client. Now, if I want to send this out to a specific borrower, I can certainly enter his name here. Let's say John Smith, right? But if I want to reuse this, or if I want to put this somewhere a little bit more generic, maybe I want to put it on my website. Maybe I want to share it in an email distribution group that I'm using to try and drum up some business. In a case like that, I would actually make this more generic. So instead of using a borrower name, I would change this over to be a marketing presentation. Now, what this does, and you'll see in just a second, it actually strips off sensitive borrower information. So instead of a first and last name, you're going to have a report headline. And when you get to the contact area where the subject property is, subject property will be omitted from the end result report. So you're basically just removing anything that could potentially be sensitive. So this is nice and safe, plain vanilla, get it out there and people can consume it. Now for my headline, this is up to you in terms of what you want to use for a headline. But remember, we're going to be doing a rent versus own presentation and we're going to show them the cost of waiting. So I've got two initiatives I'm trying to tackle with this borrower. So what do I really want my headline to be? Don't wait to buy. Something like that. Or, if you continue renting, it's going to continue costing you. I mean, I'm sure you guys can come up with lots of cool little headlines there that would attract some attention. You could even just call it the cost of waiting to purchase. Pretty plain, pretty simple, but very effective. Now, as we continue forward here, we're not going to have specific borrower home phone number, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. I don't need to put anything in there. Client or prospect kind of doesn't matter for a marketing presentation, so I'm not going to do anything in there. But notice this question here. Does he or she rent or own? Now, I want to do a rent versus own presentation, so I'm going to select rent. Now, partner email, if you are working in conjunction with a partner on this, let's say that you are putting a campaign out to a distribution list for potential prospects that you're working with Jane Realtor. Now, when you're doing that, obviously a total cost analysis or a rent versus own, you can't co-brand them. But the next best thing here is include that partner in the communication. The easy way to do that is put in their email address right here. So let's say jane@realtor.com. Now, what you're doing by entering an email address in here is when you get to the very end of the wizard, you can actually tell Mortgage Coach that you want to be notified when a presentation is viewed. If you put in your partner email, you can give that same functionality to the partner. So the same email notifications, in-app notifications that you're getting to let you know that your borrower has viewed your presentation, your partners are also going to get those same ones. So as you continue to update videos or change numbers, as you're going through that loan process, you don't necessarily need to CC the realtor on everything because they're getting alerted on this. So all they have to do is click the link. Oh, there's a new video on there. Cool. All right, they're talking about the prior to funding conditions. Great. You know what? I didn't even know they got docs out yet. That's awesome. So you're keeping your realtor in the loop without having to do any extra work on it. Now, friendly name. Friendly name is kind of a nickname for your presentation. This is not a nickname for your borrower. This is so that you can identify the difference between this presentation and others that might use the same headline. So say, for instance, I used this cost of waiting presentation and I pushed it to 5 different platforms. I put it on Facebook, I put it on my website, I put it in an email distribution list, I put it on Twitter, I put it on LinkedIn. How am I going to know which one has the most effectiveness? Which ones are getting the most clicks? Well, I'm going to get notified on all of them. But the only way to tell where it came from is by this friendly name field. So I would say something like posted to LinkedIn. And the reason I would do that is when I get my notification, it's going to show that friendly name. So it's going to tell me, you got notified on your don't wait to buy. The person viewed it for 10 minutes and 42 seconds. This was posted to LinkedIn. So now I know that one, I got some traction off that. And if I sent out 5 different campaigns like this, I'd want to measure which one of those campaigns had the best traction. And I'd probably want to use that as my primary focus point for some of my marketing efforts. Now, don't forget about the notes section here. When you're talking to an individual borrower, the notes section is really helpful because you might be collecting information that the wizard hasn't asked for yet, which, log it right here so that when you get to that point in the wizard, you have that information and you can easily put it in. And in the case of a marketing presentation, you can certainly add maybe the link that you used for, let's say if I posted it to LinkedIn, right, I might want to put my LinkedIn link right there. So I know how I can easily get back to that post. Whatever the case may be. It's an open note section. Your borrower will never see this. This is just for you. Now, as we continue forward, we're doing a rent versus own, but we've still got a goal in mind, right? So if this is a first-time home buyer, we do get my first home. You know, investment property, you can see where that's going, improve the tax situation. That's actually that's one of my goals for this one. Is they're currently renting, I want to improve their tax situation by giving them home ownership. And when I do that, I'm going to be able to continue forward in the wizard. And this is going to take me to the assumptions about the rent screen. So let's say they're paying $1,600 for rent right now. And then the annual rent increase here, this is actually kind of important. This is determining how much per year as a percentage is this rent going to continue increasing. Now, if you haven't rented in a while, you may not be aware, but it's right around 3 to 7%, depending on what market you're in. There's not a whole lot of rent control areas out there anymore. Certainly, if you are working towards a rent control area, you would put a zero increase here. But in most common situations, you know, you're in an apartment. By maybe the second year, they're boosting it up a little bit. The third year, they're boosting it up even higher. By the time you hit the fourth year in an apartment, you're ready to buy because you're sick of getting your rent increased. So I like to use kind of a national average here of 3%. Now, I also use 3% when I look at the property appreciation value, and I'll show you that a little bit further down the line here. But I like to use the same number for both so that I'm not overinflating one or the other. Now, rental insurance and other expenses, I wouldn't worry about those. This is a case study. Standard deduction. Now, if you do want to use this field, what will happen here is if you put a standard deduction for your renter, it will show a tax benefit on the rent side. So it'll assume, you know, hey, you're not itemizing anything. You're just going to take your standard deduction. Now, on the home ownership side, if you put the standard deduction in here and their tax benefit does not exceed the standard deduction that they would take, it'll just show the standard deduction as their tax benefit. Now, what I tell people, in most cases, you're probably not going to want to use this unless you're working with a CPA or a tax planner, financial planner kind of thing, because then you can get really detailed into how your borrower's tax status looks, but you don't need to be a tax expert to do this. So I would tell you, I'm probably going to stay away from standard deduction because I can isolate what the tax benefit's going to be on home ownership, but I really don't want to get in the weeds on how they might itemize something. Now, next section is affordability. I mean, this part is actually really important for an individual borrower because you're trying to pre-qualify them. For a marketing presentation, really not so important. You just got to make sure there's enough in the savings account to pay off, you know, whatever cash is going to be required at close. But you can certainly leave it out and it won't make any difference at all. Now, one thing I am going to put in here because it was part of my goal set is I want to put the tax bracket for my borrower. In this case, it's not a borrower, so I'm just going to assume based on the purchase price I'm using, the 350 area, you know, my tax bracket of affordability is going to be 25 or above. So I'm going to use 25% for my tax bracket. Now, if you want to check out the tax brackets, you can hit this Find Tax Bracket button. It'll take you to a little grid that will show you, okay, 25% is between X and Y. And you'll see that, let's open that up for you real quick. 25% happens to be between about 40,000 and 92,000. It's a huge gap, but that is the range that I would expect a $350,000 purchase price to fall into. Obviously, if your borrower makes more than that, you can certainly increase those. But just as kind of a general tax bracket to use for marketing, I'm going to use 25 because that is the most common range for a single purchaser at this price range. Now, tax credits are for the mortgage credit certificate. If you're working with that, I know it's only a small subset of people that actually have the ability to offer this, but if you are working with that, certainly feel free to use that. You can incorporate the MCC in there, and it will show a dollar for dollar credit versus just showing tax benefit. Now, affordability, I'm going to skip this page entirely. I'm not consulting a borrower right now, so I'm not having to ask them about what their desired minimums and maximums are, so I just went ahead and skipped that. And now it's time to build the product. So I've built my rent product already by just entering the rent and the rent increase. Now it's time to build my buy now product. So I'm going to come in here and just type in buy now. Now, if you've got product templates already in your system, you can certainly feel free to use a product template here. You can see I've got, FHAs in here, 20% down conventionals, conventional 5% down. Whatever your target loan is, you're going to do different variations of the same loan for all four products. So you want to choose one that represents one of your more common loan programs. So if I wanted to do, let's say, an FHA, I'm going to do my FHA 3.5% down. I'm going to make sure to select the FHA as the upfront premium type. We'll put in our purchase price. And actually, I think that was 350 that I was, or 250 that I was going to use. You can see I've got my down payment in there. We want to put in a rate that makes sense for today, maybe 4.25. And then because I used a product template, it actually brought in all my closing costs for me. But if you didn't use a product template, you could certainly come in here and hit the closing cost detail. And you can actually select one of your fee templates if you've got fee templates saved in your drop down here. If you don't, you can always add fees and just continue adding fees and then select what that fee is going to be, how much it's going to cost, and who's going to pay it. Now, if you haven't created your fee templates yet, the first time you have to come in here and do this itemization from scratch, you're going to pull out your hair. So what I would tell you is do it once, save it as a template, because you just want to be able to edit what you've already done instead of having to recreate. You don't want to rebuild the wheel every time, right? So build a couple of general templates for yourself, build a conventional 30, build an FHA, maybe a USDA, VA, and then do purchase and refi for each one. That way, you're going to cover the gamut on just about every type of loan you can offer. If you've got specific types of programs that your company offers, certainly build a template for those as well. But the great part about this is you can see that if I needed to make edits, I could simply pull down one of my templates and make very minor edits to it instead of having to do item by item, figuring it out. Now, once you're done there, just hit apply to loan, and this is going to save the closing cost information back to this loan scenario. Now, I've already got my upfront MIP in there because I brought it in from a product template, but certainly if you had to put it from scratch, put in your 1.75, check the box to finance it into the loan, and then you can continue forward. Now, the third screen asks you for the monthly costs. So I'm using factors here. You can see I use 0.35 for my hazard insurance. I'm in California, so I'm going to use 1.25 as my tax rate. Certainly, if you're in a different state, you're going to use a different tax rate there. And then when I get to the mortgage insurance, FHA is easy because I know that these are static guidelines. For 3.5% down, it's always going to be 0.85 unless they determine to change their guidelines again. But I know that 0.85 is going to work. I also know that I need to have this checkbox checked. So that's part of my product template as well. I want that mortgage insurance to recalculate every year based on the outstanding balance. And it's pretty important. If you don't check this box on an FHA loan, it's going to think your mortgage insurance is just like conventional, where it carries until an LTV cutoff. For FHA, there is no LTV cutoff. It carries for the life of the loan, but it does step down every single year. It recalculates that based on the average last 12 months balance. So check this box, and this is going to match your origination system when you're doing FHA loans. Now, pretty critical on any government loan that does have a monthly mortgage insurance, you want to make sure that that carries for the minimum that equals the term. So this is going to last for the life of the loan. It's going to step down because of this checkbox, but it is going to last for the life of the loan. Now I can add reserves to the situation, and you can certainly just estimate your reserves, say 3 months of hazard insurance and maybe 6 months of taxes, and then a hazard insurance premium. Now when I do that, it automatically takes these numbers, multiplies them by the monthly amount, and then passes that back to my closing cost details. So you'll see if I actually go back a screen here, my prepaid escrows are now showing in there. They weren't before. Those have been piped over from what I just selected in this screen. Now that I've got my Buy Now product, it's time to start building the other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Another Product. Now this is where it gets a lot easier because you don't have to do all the data entry you just did all over again. You're simply going to name it. So let's say 0.25 rate increase. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use the copy button. So you're going to hit Copy From. And then when it pulls up the list, you're going to copy that Buy Now option that you just made. So you go ahead and hit OK. And then it filtered in exactly the same loan product as the first one I did. Now the difference on this one is going to be the 0.25 rate increase. So instead of 4.25, I'm going to go up to 4.5. Now that's all I need to change for this one. Because I used the copy button, all my closing costs came over, upfront MIP came over, even the monthly costs, mortgage insurance, hazard reserves, everything. It's all in there. So now I'm just going to add another product. Now that I've got two, my third one is going to be a price increase. So instead of a rate increase, we're going to show the price increase. So 25K price increase. And again, I'm going to use that copy button. I'm not going to redo all the work. Copy the buy now. And then instead of changing the rate, this time I'm going to increase the purchase price. And then copy button took care of everything else for me, so I can just kind of truck through these screens until I get to the last screen of this product, and then I'm going to add another one. Now the final product, product 4, is going to be a worst case. And it's up to you in terms of what you want to call your worst case scenario. You can call it price and rate increase. That tends to be a pretty common one right now. Let's do that. Price and rate up. And then I'm going to use my copy button one more time. Copy that buy now. And then once that is copied in there, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make two edits. $275 for my price, and I'm going to edit the rate. So instead of that 4.25, I'll do the 4.5. Now I am actually done with my data entry here. And now it's time to go to the analysis screen because I want to see how these loans line up with each other. I'm going to make sure it's representing what I want to show my borrower. Now you can see my property appreciation rate here, 3%. That equals my rent increase. You can see what my rent is versus my net monthly payments. And then I'm showing rent versus principal paid here. But remember I told you earlier, you can actually show different metrics. So if you wanted to, you could show rent versus tax benefit. Or if you're showing the standard deduction, you could show tax benefit analysis. That would actually show a little bit of a benefit on the rent side, and then you'd see the benefit on the home ownership side. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is a visual cue here. When you get to the finalized presentation, the graphics are going to look very similar to what you're seeing on this screen. Now, one of the things I like to do is when I'm trying to drive home a point, I like to do a cascade effect with these graphics. So you can see there's actually a reason I did them in the order I did. These are going up. So we're seeing rent, that's their highest cost. Buy now, that's your best option. You wait, it might cost you a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And you can see this actually carries through into the short-term area. Tax benefit does the same thing. And then when we get to the long term, we can choose total principal paid if you want. You can choose total net worth, which if you're going to do that, just make sure to put a little bit in the savings account so rent shows a net worth from their liquid assets they would have otherwise spent on the down payment. In this case, I can show net worth as a renter, 0. You have no net worth except for your liquid assets. On the home ownership side, this is all equity. So because I didn't use the savings at all, there's no liquid assets being considered for this. This is just equity versus renting, nothing. So that's a pretty powerful one that I like to use. Total interest in MI paid, this is actually kind of a cool metric too, because we can see how much it's going to cost for rent, about $360,000. And then these are the real costs, interest in MI, of the loan programs. So 158 instead of 357, yeah, it's pretty significant. Now, you don't need to do anything on this page. You're not working with an individual borrower, so you don't need contact information. You don't even need property detail. And because I made this a marketing presentation, even if I put something in here, it wouldn't show up on the finalized presentation. So now I get to choose what do I want to show. You can see I can show these are all 4 products, or if you let's keep it simple. Instead of showing this, I just want to show buy now versus price and the rate go up. You can uncheck these boxes and these 2 products will not show up on your presentation. You could recheck them at any time and then they'll pop right in there. Now, as we go through these last couple of screens, you get an option to add some additional verbiage around what the net monthly payments are showing. You get to add some more verbiage around the short-term area and even the long-term. And when you get to the final screen, this is where you generate your link. So always, always, always choose email link. Even if you want to print it out or save a PDF, choose email link and then do the preview. you can print or PDF direct from that preview, and it's going to look a lot better than the ones right here. Now the notification button is checked, so I'm going to get notified when this report is viewed. I'm not going to use the call button, but notice this button here, send Edge View Alert to the partner. The partner is also going to get notified, just like I am every time my client views this presentation. Now I can't stress the importance enough on using a quote date. If you publish rates anywhere, whether you're putting this out on social media, website, whatever, you've got a rate tied to a payment, please tie it to a date. You don't want to be called on the carpet a month down the line because you published a 4 1/8 rate that's no longer available. So just keep that in mind. You always want to put a quote date on any presentation you do inside Mortgage Coach. Now, finally, it's time to generate the link. Now, this is the link that you're going to send to your borrower. So when you click on this button, it's going to bring up a little dialog box here for you, and it will generate your link. Now, you can certainly copy this and paste this into an email and send it out to your list, and it's perfectly acceptable the way it is. But I will tell you that if I was to receive this presentation and just look at it, I might understand it, but without video guidance attached to it, it's going to be a little difficult. I'm going to have a hard time really sharing it with other people. And one of your goals is when you send out these presentations, especially from a marketing perspective, you want it to get shared. So it better be powerful, it better be digestible, and it better be understandable. So how do we do that? Add video to it. Click the Add Audio Video button here. Now this is going to bring up a preview of the presentation. And you can see this is the rent versus own, same one that we were looking at before. Now I have the option of recording a message on it. And remember I told you before you can print and save from these previews. These are going to be your options for printing and saving down at the bottom right. But I'm going to go ahead and record a message on this guy. And there I am. Hi, everybody. Now, one of the things I really like to do, and when you're doing video presentations, it looks like my internet is kind of slowing down because it is choking. There it goes. All right, perfect. When you're doing these presentations, get yourself a yellow sticky pad, write out your bullet point list of what you want to discuss, and then stick it right behind your camera. Now, the reason I tell you this is because when you do that, you stick it behind your camera, you can keep eye contact with the camera the entire time you are talking to your borrower. And this is pretty important. As long as you've got a way to engage them with eye contact, they feel like they know you just from looking at this video. So when you do your video, there's a lot of key factors you want to consider. I've got a quick start guide that we've got in our handouts section in the GoToWebinar panel. So if you want to click on handouts inside there, and there's a quick start guide there that you can download. It's got checklists for how to do video. It's got some scripting in there, very valuable stuff. So check that out when you get the chance. That's certainly going to help on this. But I'll tell you, some of the key factors to observe here is keep your video under about 2 minutes. People lose attention span after 2 minutes. Make sure that you start off with an introduction and base it on, if you've had a previous conversation with a client, you want to discuss your client's goals. In this case, it's a marketing presentation, so you've got a very wide audience. You're introducing yourself and your practice, and then the subject of what you're trying to do. Keep it very top level in terms of mortgage information, and then cross-sell your realtor partner if you're working with a realtor, and then solid call to action at the end. You want them to call you as soon as they're done with this, but you also want them to share this with other people. Ask for it. Got to ask them to do this or they won't do it. So as long as you get those things in order, when you send this presentation out, you're going to see it get shared. You're going to see notifications coming in from different types of platforms. And it's such a powerful presentation that it's really easy to understand why you should stop renting. But why you should stop renting and buy now, very powerful. So with that said, I did say I was going to show you one more thing before we go, and that's I've done all this work to create a rent versus own presentation. What if I also want to create a total cost analysis out of this? Well, I don't have to go in and recreate the wheel here. Instead, all I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to where I select the type of report. I'm going to select the total cost. And you can see I have different options here. So in this case, I did include taxes and insurance. So I'm going to get rid of that little verbiage down at the bottom that says are not. And then I'm going to continue through this wizard. And when I get to the very end here and I generate a link, this is going to be different than the link that I did for the rent versus own. So now I can, without doing much, you can see just a couple of button clicks there. I was able to get to a point where I could generate a total cost analysis out of the rent versus own that I already created. All I would need to do is put a video on this one. They can have two totally separate videos on it. So same type of rules when it comes to videos on the TCA versus videos on a rent versus own. It's going to be roughly the same. Just understand that the output format is going to be similar, but the rent versus own is going to be everything compared to the rent. On a total cost analysis, you actually have the ability to control which loans are the benchmarks for comparison. So with that, I don't see any questions coming through in our questions area, so I'm hoping I've got all of you spellbound right now. But if that's not the case and you do need some help, don't forget, inside of your Mortgage Coach Edge system, if you click on help, this is going to take you over to our support center. Now, our support center has a couple of different features that are there to help you. One of them, oops, I must have clicked that twice. One of them is a search box up at the top here. And you can see you can search our library of resources. This is going to pull all the different articles that we've published, all the different video training that we've published. You can certainly drive down by subject matter and actually just go through the articles if you want to. You can see we've got some that are promoted. What's the best way to start creating my feed templates? That is a pain point for a lot of people. So if you haven't done those yet, check this one out. It's going to be pretty helpful for you. But notice down at the bottom right, there's a little widget. It says support on it. This is very much like the search box up at the top. So let's say you wanted to learn all about the cost of waiting. Type in cost of waiting. There you go. Number one result, how to build a cost of waiting presentation. Then there's live training webinar recordings, which have some industry leaders showing you how they do cost of waitings. And then there's another one here. How do I build the Realtor Prospect Packet? This is pretty cool. If you haven't seen it yet, this is combining several different presentations so you can kind of have a packet that you can hand out to people. But you can also hit View More, and there's lots of stuff in here. Now, if you don't find your answer in there, hit Contact Us. This is going to ask you, what's your name? What's your email address? Give me your Edge link, and then how can we help you? You can even put an attachment on there. When you do this, it's going to submit a ticket to our support team. They'll get back to you right away. This is going to go straight into our support ticketing system, and then you'll get a response immediately from the system to let you know we got it. But then you're also going to get another one coming directly back from our support team with a solution for you. So with that said, if you do have any questions, contact our team. They're always willing to help. 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific time are our support hours, so just keep that in mind. And then periodically, you're going to see that we're starting to release chat in a very limited fashion. So you'll see for a couple hours a day, we're getting our reps and kind of putting them into a chat session. So in this Contact Us area, if chat is available, you'll actually see at the bottom right, chat live with us now. So if you do see that, just make sure this is brand new for our people. So we're kind of soft releasing it. Have patience with us. We're learning how to use the chat system. We're learning how to type as fast as we can to keep up with you, but we definitely want to help as much as we can. So ping us on there, whether it's via email or via chat. We're always happy to help. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the call today. I don't see any more questions in there. Oh, thanks, Chris, for your comments. I appreciate that. I'm glad that was helpful. But then anybody else, if you do have questions, just shoot a note to our support team. We're always happy to help. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.